Kendra Albright's boots pounded against the cold, metallic floor of the training arena. The air was thick with tension, and the faint hum of the Academy's automated systems echoed through the chamber. The final trial. She had passed every test before this, but this one was different. It wasn't just about skill. It wasn't just about survival. This was about proving that she could become the perfect soldier, emotionless, fearless, unstoppable. Her heart thudded in her chest, but she ignored it. The trainers always told her, fear is weakness. The goal here was simple: eliminate every threat, reach the extraction point, and do it without hesitation. No fear. No emotion. The arena was vast, the walls lined with panels that flickered with blue lights, giving the whole space a cold, mechanical feel. It was an artificial simulation, designed to push cadets to the brink. The first challenge, an assault through the alien landscape of the Drashii, humanity's greatest enemy. Her squad was scattered across the barren terrain. Her target, an isolated, heavily guarded fortress where the Drashii held a critical prisoner. Kendra crouched low, scanning the surroundings. The sky above was a sickly shade of violet, casting an eerie glow across the barren wasteland. The ground was cracked, fissures running deep into the earth like scars. The wind howled in the distance, but the sharp smell of ozone from the artificial atmosphere was all she could focus on. The mission was clear, no hesitation. But Kendra's mind was already at war. The fear that she had spent so long trying to suppress was clawing at the edges of her thoughts. Her mind flashed back to her last conversation with General Thorne, the head of the Academy. "You will be a tool," Thorne had said, his cold eyes piercing into hers. "And tools don't have emotions." Kendra had nodded at the time, swallowing the lump in her throat, but something about his words lingered. She had trained hard, pushed past her limits to become what the Academy demanded, an emotionless weapon. But in the quiet moments, when she was alone in her room, her thoughts turned darker. Was this all she was, just a tool? A sharp crack broke her from her reverie. The sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, drew her attention to the horizon. She wasn't alone. The Drashii had spotted her. "Engage," she muttered to herself, pushing the doubt aside. It was time to act. Her rifle came up to her shoulder instinctively, the familiar weight reassuring her. The rifle's barrel was sleek, designed for precision, and she aimed it at the first of the approaching Drashii soldiers. The alien creatures were tall, their bodies covered in dark armor that reflected the harsh light from above. They moved like predators, their elongated limbs and sharp claws making them look more like creatures of nightmare than soldiers. The first shot rang out, and the alien fell, its body crumpling to the ground with a sickening thud. Kendra didn't flinch. She had been trained for this. She fired again, then again, picking off the targets with deadly accuracy. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to push the adrenaline down. Fear didn't belong here. Fear would only get in the way. One by one, her squad members took down the enemies, moving in synchronized precision. Kendra's eyes flicked to the digital readout on her wrist, a map showing their progress. They were close. The fortress was just ahead. As they neared their objective, the tension in the air thickened. The Drashii stronghold loomed in the distance, a dark structure rising from the ground like a jagged tooth. Kendra could feel the weight of her mission pressing down on her. This was no longer about survival. This was about being the perfect soldier. About being perfect. "Cadet Albright," came a voice over the comms. It was Thorne, his voice cold and distant as always. "Focus. Complete the mission. Don't let your emotions interfere." The words struck Kendra like a slap. Thorne's voice, always so stern, always so sure, had been a constant presence in her life since she entered the Academy. He was the reason she was here, the reason she was training to become someone devoid of weakness. He believed that in order to win the war, humanity had to discard its emotions, its fears, and become cold, calculating warriors. But as she crept closer to the entrance of the fortress, Kendra couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The fear she had tried so hard to bury was crawling back to the surface. She ignored it. "There's no room for fear," she reminded herself. You can't afford to be weak. The door to the fortress was in front of her now. Her squad moved into position, ready to breach. Kendra placed her hand on the cold metal surface of the door, waiting for the signal. The blast rang out, a deafening roar as the door exploded inward. Smoke poured into the chamber, and Kendra's squad surged forward. Inside, the Drashii were waiting. The battle that followed was a blur. Kendra's rifle was a blur of motion, each shot fired with deadly accuracy. But the Drashii were relentless. They pushed back harder than expected, forcing Kendra and her squad into a defensive position. A scream cut through the chaos. Kendra turned, her heart stopping as one of her squadmates, Lieutenant Sorik, was thrown against the wall, his body lifeless before he hit the ground. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. The fear she had buried deep inside her rushed forward, filling every part of her mind. Her hands trembled, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something: fear. No, she whispered to herself. No, I can't. But before she could finish the thought, a Drashii soldier lunged at her, claws outstretched. Kendra reacted instinctively. She ducked, evading the strike, and brought her rifle up in a fluid motion. She squeezed the trigger. The alien fell. The world snapped back into focus. The fear that had overtaken her moments before was still there, lurking at the edges of her thoughts, but she didn't let it consume her. She couldn't. Not now. Not here. She moved forward, eyes narrowed in determination. The mission wasn't over. She couldn't afford to fail. The stronghold was finally secure. Kendra stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the fallen Drashii. Her squad had completed their objective, against the odds. The prisoner had been rescued. But as she surveyed the battlefield, her heart still pounded in her chest. The fear hadn't gone away, and she realized, for the first time, that it might never fully leave her. But it wasn't her enemy anymore. The mission was over. She had completed it. But Kendra knew that the real battle, her personal battle, was only just beginning. The cold, artificial light of the Human Coalition command station flickered above Kendra as she entered the debriefing room. The sterile walls, the hum of the ventilation system, the clinking of equipment, everything felt distant, as if the station itself was holding its breath. Kendra's mind was far from here, however. Her thoughts were still caught in the final moments of the mission. The image of Sorik's lifeless body was burned into her mind, and no matter how many times she tried to push it away, it lingered, a constant reminder of the human cost of war. The room was stark and functional. A long metal table stretched across the center, surrounded by several chairs. At the far end sat General Thorne, his back straight, his fingers steepled in front of him as he watched her enter. His eyes were unreadable, cold, calculating, as always. Kendra didn't sit immediately. She stood, her eyes scanning the room, her heart still racing from the adrenaline of the mission. There was a strange emptiness inside her, an ache that she couldn't name. It wasn't fear this time, it was something deeper, something that gnawed at her from the inside out. You completed the mission. Thorne's voice cut through her thoughts. It was flat, devoid of emotion, as if he were talking about a routine task rather than a life-and-death struggle. Kendra nodded, but her throat tightened. We lost Sorik, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thorne didn't flinch. Casualties are inevitable in war. His death wasn't in vain. You achieved the objective. He paused, his gaze sharpening. But I'm more concerned with your performance. You hesitated during the mission. That cost us valuable time. Fear is something that should have been eliminated by now, Cadet Albright. Why did it resurface? Kendra felt a sharp pang in her chest, but she quickly pushed it down. She had been trained to suppress emotion, to remove weakness. Yet, in that moment, standing before Thorne, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't the one who was broken, he was. I did what I had to do, Kendra replied, her voice steady. I kept us alive. You let your fear control you. You're still thinking like a soldier, not a weapon, Thorne snapped. Humanity cannot afford soldiers. We need warriors, those who are unburdened by emotion. If you continue to let weakness hold you back, you'll never be ready for what's coming. Kendra's breath hitched. And what exactly is coming, sir? Thorn leaned forward, his gaze intense. The Drashii aren't the only threat we face. There are others, other factions, other forces, just as ruthless, just as determined to extinguish humanity from the galaxy. Our survival depends on our ability to adapt, to become something more than human. He paused, his lips curling into a thin, almost imperceptible smile. Something better. The words sank into Kendra like a cold stone, and the weight of his meaning was clear. He wasn't just talking about defeating the Drashii. He was talking about transforming humanity into something unrecognizable. Something devoid of all weakness, including compassion, empathy, and fear. Kendra's mind began to race. Could she really become that person? Could she truly erase everything that made her human, everything that made her who she was? Before she could respond, the door to the room opened, and another officer stepped inside. It was Lieutenant Carver, one of Thorn's most trusted aides. His eyes darted briefly to Kendra before focusing on Thorn. General, there's been an update from the Drashii front, Carver said, his voice clipped. The Coalition's intel on their new weapon was accurate. They're gearing up for a full-scale assault. The timelines moved up. We need to respond now. Thorn's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing as he processed the information. I'll be there shortly. Prepare the response team. Carver nodded and left the room, the door sliding shut behind him. Kendra stood in silence, waiting for Thorn to speak again. When he did, his voice was colder than before, a clear sign that the discussion was over. No, Thorn said, his tone firm. You will join the next mission. I expect you to follow orders, eliminate the targets, and eliminate the fear. Understood? Kendra didn't hesitate. Understood, sir. The rest of the day was a blur. The mission briefing was brief but precise. The Drashii had made a bold move, and the Coalition was preparing for their counterattack. Kendra and her squad would be sent in to eliminate a key Drashii commander who was believed to be orchestrating the assault. The plan was simple: strike fast, hit hard, and leave no survivors. There would be no room for hesitation. As Kendra prepared her gear in the barracks, her mind wandered back to Thorn's words. The idea of eliminating fear. She had been trained to suppress it, to push it down, to ignore it. But now it was a specter that refused to stay buried. Was this really the only way? To become a mindless weapon, devoid of everything that made her human? A part of her, small, fragile, wondered if Thorn was right. Maybe the only way to win this war, to save humanity, was to become what he wanted her to be. A soldier who could stand in the face of death without flinching, without feeling. A soldier who could follow orders without question. But another part of her, a part that she couldn't quite silence, begged to differ. Fear, she thought, could be a weapon too. It could drive them to fight harder, to push past their limits. Fear was the reason she fought. It was the reason she cared. If she could control it, rather than erase it, she might still have a chance. Ready for the mission, Albright? Kendra snapped back to the present. It was Lieutenant Graves, her second in command. He was already suited up, his helmet under his arm. Kendra nodded, strapping her own helmet into place. Let's get it done. As they boarded the transport ship, the weight of her mission settled over her like a heavy cloak. She had one more chance to prove herself, to show that she could rise above her doubts and fears. But in her heart, she knew that the real battle wasn't the one ahead of her, it was the one raging inside her. The transport ship descended through the atmosphere of the Drashii-occupied planet, the sound of engines humming in the background. The rest of the squad sat in silence, their faces hidden behind helmets, their expressions unreadable. Kendra's thoughts were still clouded, but her focus had returned. The mission was everything. She couldn't afford to think about anything else. The drop zone was clear. They would infiltrate the Drashii compound, eliminate the target, and extract. Simple. But as the ship touched down, Kendra felt the familiar knot of fear twist in her stomach. She forced it down. Fear was a weakness. and there was no place for weakness in this war. Kendra stood at the edge of the Drashii compound, her rifle raised, scanning the perimeter. The mission was a success so far. Her squad had infiltrated the stronghold with precision, neutralizing the outer defenses and securing a safe path to their target. But even now, in the midst of victory, something felt off. Her skin prickled with unease, a tight knot in her stomach that no amount of training could undo. Her squad moved with fluid efficiency, following the plan step by step. But Kendra's mind was elsewhere, torn between the task at hand and the overwhelming questions swirling inside her. As the squad leader, she had to maintain her focus, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the words of General Thorne. Eliminate fear. Become a weapon, not a soldier. The weight of those words pressed down on her with every step she took. How could she reconcile the soldier she had become with the person she still was beneath the layers of training and conditioning? The mission was straightforward, yet the deeper she went into enemy territory, the more she realized that the true battle wasn't against the Drashii, it was against herself. "Albright, we're good to go." Lieutenant Graves' voice crackled in her earpiece, snapping her out of her reverie. "The target's inside. We're breaching in 5. Kendra gave a sharp nod, clicking her comm in acknowledgement. "Copy that. Everyone stay sharp. We move fast and clean." They breached the inner door, entering the heart of the compound. The air inside was stale, the walls lined with dim, flickering lights. The place had the sterile, clinical feel of a military installation, cold, impersonal. But as they made their way down the narrow hallway, Kendra couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just here to eliminate an enemy commander. The Drashii had something more in store, something they were hiding deep within the compound. "Eyes up," Kendra ordered, her voice steady despite the growing sense of dread. "Something's not right here." The squad tightened their formation, moving forward with purpose. Kendra led the way, her boots making no sound on the cold metal floor. She could hear the faint sounds of distant alarms, but they seemed muffled, like a part of her subconscious trying to warn her of something she couldn't quite place. As they approached the inner chamber where their target was supposed to be, Kendra's thoughts raced. The mission was nearing its climax, but she felt a growing sense of disconnect. The weight of the weapon in her hand seemed heavier now, its purpose unclear. Was she fighting to protect humanity, or had she become a tool for something darker? "On me!" Kendra whispered, signaling to her squad to fall into position. The door ahead of them was reinforced, a heavy metal barricade that would require all their strength to breach. They had been briefed that their target, a Drashii commander responsible for the upcoming assault, was hiding behind it. But what they hadn't been told was why this particular commander was so valuable. What was it that made this mission so critical? Graves motioned to Kendra, his eyes narrowed. "You ready?" Kendra hesitated, the familiar weight of the question hanging in the air. Was she ready? To kill again, to follow orders without questioning them? To destroy without hesitation? The fear began to rise in her chest, just as it had during the last mission. This time, however, she didn't push it down. She didn't suppress it. Instead, she allowed herself to feel it, to let it guide her. "Yeah," Kendra finally said, her voice firm. "I'm ready." They stormed the door, their weapons raised. Inside, the chamber was dark, lit only by the faint glow of emergency lights. The Drashii commander was standing at the far side of the room, facing away from them, as if waiting for them. The tension in the air thickened. Kendra's mind raced as she surveyed the scene. There was something wrong here, something that didn't fit. The commander was alone. No guards. No reinforcements. General Thorne was right about one thing, Kendra thought. We've become weapons. But why do I feel like something's been stripped away? Without hesitation, Kendra fired. The shot rang out, echoing through the chamber. The Drashii commander turned, but it was too late. The blast hit him square in the chest. He staggered backward, but instead of falling, he steadied himself, his glowing eyes locking with Kendra's. "You think you're here to stop me?" The commander's voice was strange, a mix of distorted tones, like several voices overlapping each other. "You are too late." Kendra's heart skipped a beat. The voice wasn't just alien, it was something far worse. This wasn't just a Drashii commander. This was something more, something that had been waiting for them. Before Kendra could react, the room shifted. The walls pulsed with an unnatural energy, and the air crackled with static. A bright light flared from the center of the chamber, and suddenly, Kendra was no longer standing in a simple room. She was standing inside a massive neural interface, a chamber designed to interface with minds, to control them. "Welcome, Kendra Albright," the commander's voice echoed, now deep and resonant. "You are part of the experiment now. The true test begins." A wave of realization hit Kendra like a physical blow. She had been so focused on her mission, on eliminating threats, that she hadn't seen the truth staring her in the face. This mission wasn't just about killing an enemy, it was about her. About testing her resolve. The Drashii commander, or whatever he truly was, had known exactly what she was capable of, and had manipulated her all along. "No," Kendra whispered, stepping back, a cold chill running down her spine. This wasn't supposed to happen. The chamber was no longer just a room. It was a trap, designed to break her, designed to make her realize that she wasn't the one in control. She was the test. She was the experiment. As the realization sunk in, Kendra felt a surge of anger. The Drashii had underestimated her. And now, she was done following orders. "Enough!" Kendra shouted, her voice breaking through the chaos. "I'm not your experiment!" With that, she reached for the power core at the center of the room, a bright blue light pulsing from it. She didn't care what it did. All that mattered was breaking free. Breaking free from the control, from the fear that had been instilled in her, from the belief that she had to be something she wasn't. She didn't need to erase her fear to be strong. Kendra smashed the core, the explosion of energy reverberating through the room. The aftermath was silent, but the change inside Kendra was deafening. The room was gone, replaced by the cold, sterile walls of the command station. Her squad, her mission, everything had dissolved into the reality of the war. But Kendra knew one thing for certain now. She wasn't just a soldier. She was human. And her fight was far from over.